It could, up to, what could they not get more than?
40.
No more than 40. So what did they default to in the count? 39. Okay. Do we know a really important figure in the New Testament that received that?
Christ. No, Paul.
Paul. There you go. Right. Paul says, twice I received 39 stripes save one, or 40 stripes save one. What's he saying? They counted up to 39. They gave him the full punishment that they could give him by law. So again, why do they need to guard against overzealousness in the punishment of crime? The text tells us, but I didn't put it on here. I don't know. How many of y'all have read through Deuteronomy or are reading through Deuteronomy as we go through? Like 2, 3 hands. Okay. I want to encourage you to do your own reading so that we come to class prepared to discuss. But why do they guard against overzealousness? It's to guard against their heart and the way they feel about the recipient of the punishment. If the punishment has been enacted and is done, then are things completed? Yes. Punishment with your children. Do you hold it over their head every day, the things that they've done wrong in the past? Good parents don't, do they? Why? What's the reason? Yeah, so to encourage them to better conduct, right? So change is the goal, and the exercise of punishment in the corporal way in this particular time was intended to correct, right, a wrongdoing, right or wrong. The overzealousness of punishment came to the heart, and a despisal of those who were receiving it, and then a general hatred and contempt for anyone who had received that punishment. So again, God putting up stopgaps to keep them from developing hard hearts against one another. Foreigners were to be, where'd it go? Foreigners were to be afforded justice. No collateral was to be taken from a widow that caused her duress, or that would cause her duress. Okay, why? Do widows have the ability to take care of themselves?
Not really in the Jewish society, because the men they depended on for the income. That's part of the reason they left the corners of the fields for the widows, so that they could gather and go back and harvest the field after they've been through it once.
That's exactly right. So after the first gleanings, what happened with the rest of the field? Was it ever harvested again? Nope. It was left for who? For the poor, for the widows, for those that were economically wanting. All right. So do we see a major figure who took advantage of that law in the Old Testament? Ruth. Absolutely. Ruth and Naomi. They had the ability to go and glean whose field? Anybody remember? This is a Bible question. Boaz. Yes, you ladies should know, right? That's exactly right. So Boaz. So you have these things being employed by the children of Israel and then being utilized for the betterment of every person in society. Ultimately, who's taking care of the people? God. So who's going to make sure that everybody is taken care of? God. But again, through these means, there's a fairness that reigns and that everyone is taken care of. All right. When harvesting crops, a farmer was not to be greedy and go through the process a second time. What remained or what was left was to remain for the poor who had the right to the second harvest. This would also include the widows as well. Okay. And the orphans, the fatherless. Disputes between individuals were to be decided in court. The judges themselves determined, number one, who was guilty, and two, the extent to which he was to be flogged. So that was a discernment by the judge. Does the crime fit the punishment? Does the punishment that we're enacting fit what has been accomplished? And if so, how do we execute that? Well, the punishment was to take place in the presence of the judge to ensure that no excess was administered. Never were the lashes to exceed 40. Okay, so in Jewish law, could not scourge someone more than 40 times. The reason why they only counted to 39 was in case they miscounted and accidentally went over. So again, another structural element that they set up to make sure they didn't violate the law in that respect. An ox was not to be muzzled when he was threshing the grain. He had a right to the grain as he worked. Is this utilized in the New Testament anywhere? Yeah, the pay of those who work in the service of the kingdom. Many of you argued that, oh, well, you shouldn't have a hired preacher. You shouldn't pay somebody in the church to do church work because that's the responsibility of everybody. Did Paul have a living on serving the church? Yeah, it wasn't from Corinth, was it? You know, why is the argument made in 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 9 here, against, or 2 Corinthians 9. Is it 1 Corinthians 9? 2 Corinthians 9. I don't know. Read both of them. You'll find it. I know it's chapter 9 of A Corinthians. But why was that the case? Why didn't he take money from the church at Corinth? He was working to help them to support them. So that they couldn't accuse him of personal profit for teaching the gospel, okay? Which a lot of people did in that day and age, would go to various places and teach with the expectation that remuneration would be part of their teaching. And so that's all they did. They would go around and hustle different places. Paul is ensuring that the church at Corinth can't charge him with that. But did Paul take funds from other congregations? Namely, one that I can think of. What's that? Yes, the church at Philippi. They supported him immensely in his work. Okay, what did it cost to write a letter in the New Testament? If you were to write a work like Romans, it would be anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 in today's money. That's how much it would cost to write something like that. Okay, they didn't have copy machines, and they didn't have copy paper or college-ruled note paper. I hate wide-ruled. They didn't have those things at the time to sit down with a big ballpoint pen and write out a treatise to everybody. That was not part of the culture for everyone. It cost money to buy papyrus. It cost money to buy the ink and to hire a scribe, somebody who could actually write legibly and send it out to someone else to read. So again, these things are going to cost money. So what is Paul indicating in Corinthians? That the people who are engaged in the work of the church deserve remuneration for this. That also is to receive pay. Who is that? Okay, in the distribution, yes. In the benevolent acts of the church, widows are to be cared for by the church if there's no family members to tend to them. The elders, absolutely. Let an elder who rules well be counted worthy of double honor. It doesn't mean a higher estimation of praise and respect. Okay, the term double honor there is used for pay. Okay, again, Galatians chapter 6, let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him that teaches in all good things. What is the communication in all good things? It's payment. Okay, we're not paying them to tell us what we want to hear. Okay, we're paying them for their time and their effort spent in study. So there is a benefit and a blessing to have someone who has the privilege to learn the Word of God and to teach it. Has that been the case throughout God's institution of the Mosaic Law? Who was that class that taught the people? The Levites, the priests, those that dwelt in the city with them and that worked with them and taught them the law and made sure that they were being followed. And as a result, what happened? They were paid by the people in food goods and in crops and in tithes. So the Levites earned their living, were taken care of by God through the people. So this is not a foreign principle to the New Testament. Right, so Paul uses this statement, okay, muzzle not the ox that treadeth out the grain, to speak to the fairness principle, the right principle. Okay, what is the ox doing? How does a threshing floor work? Or a granary work? Yeah, so they go around and they crush the heads of wheat, and is that millstone light? No, so the ox is actually doing a lot of work, aren't they? All right, so what is he saying? Take care of them while they're working. That's the principle. And take care of those that work for you. And if they're out there working in the grain, don't put a muzzle on them to make sure that you have 4 or 5 more bites of grain left, okay? Let them snack on the grain as they're treading it out, okay? Because again, the laborer is worthy of his hire. The ox here, the treatment of animals, is certainly worth encouraging. And if you let them do that, what does that build up within the animal itself? A desire to do the work. Hey, I got to pull this stone around, but I get some good grain for it. right? So again, there's some principles there that are worth noting. Now, unlawful desire, what would this be in one word? Yeah, covetousness, right? So is covetousness right? What is to covet rather than to want? How many of you have coveted things? Nobody? I see a few hands. Not one that we're willing to admit, I guess. What is covetousness? And don't say unlawful desire.
Desire for something that someone else has, or an ability that someone else has, honor that someone else receives.
Okay, so the desire for something someone else has, maybe the honor that someone receives, when does it become a problem? Okay, can I want to be as, what's a good thing to say? Can I want maybe the status that someone else has? Can I work for that?
Yes, you can work.
When does that become a problem, though?
When it becomes someone else.
Okay, when you begin to harm someone else, or what's that? I hear whispers.
You spend all your time to that goal.
When that becomes the main focus, has anybody been covetous? Well, do y'all know of anybody who's been covetous of money? What does that look like? How does that normally manifest itself? Okay, they're stingy. Greed. And what's that? I didn't hear you. Stealing. Okay, certainly, yeah. People rob banks, right? Not where I was going with that one, but yes, that is true. There's one other way. Do we fault somebody who spends 60 hours a week apart from their family working overtime? No, not if it's necessary, but what if the motive now is, I want more money?
I had to be reminded once that it's not me making money, it's God's providing. You might be showing up to work, but I think that the problem with covetousness is almost saying to God in his face, you're not taking care of me. You don't give me what I want and desire, so I'm going to get it myself, or I'm going to think that you're not the source of the care that I get.
Yes, so certainly one of the root causes, and that's an excellent point, TJ, is a lack of trust in God that he's providing for us the best things that we need or desire or want. God said he will never leave us or forsake us. He's going to take care of every need that we have. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, give no thought, right, for what you shall eat or what you shall drink or what you shall wear, okay?
Just don't work on Sundays.
Don't work on, I work on Sundays.
How do you work, James?
Very carefully. But so covetousness is a heart issue, right? It is a misplacing of desires and affections and putting them at the top. Okay? And I love what Paul says in Colossians chapter 3. He's telling them to put away all of these things. And the last thing that he mentions there, I believe it's verse 7, is and covetousness, and he qualifies it. Anybody know what he says after covetousness? Colossians 3 and verse 7. Which is idolatry. Okay? Covetousness seeks to remove God from the number one priority in life and puts up material goods as the priority. Okay? Now, in the Ten Commandments, what does he say not to covet? Yes, your neighbor's wife, oxen, cattle, the things that he possesses. Okay? Why would I covet my neighbor's oxen and cattle? Well, because they are better at bearing animals, and I wish that mine were better and had a higher yield. Why not the wife? Well, maybe she's prettier than mine, or she has a better disposition, and so I'm coveting the relationship that they might have. Does that happen today? Yeah, it does. Okay, so covetousness is certainly one of those things that we need to be aware of. And he addresses this in chapter 25, verses 5 through 16. It deals with an expansion, like we said, of the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. There is the expectation of the Levitical law concerning inheritances. A widow who had no sons was to have a son by her brother-in-law, so the family was not to be blotted out of the nation. So as he moves into this discussion, he's talking about the practice of the levirate marriage. What is the levirate marriage? Yeah, it was intended to continue the procession of inheritances in the land in certain families in those areas. Could you sell your inheritance to a brother or sister in Israel? I mean, you could, but at the 7th year, where did it go? It went back to the family. All right, so what you were given as a family was intended to stay in the family. That property was your property indefinitely, in perpetuity. Now, if no one's there anymore to till that land or that ground, what's going to happen? Other families are going to encroach on that land and take that land. And what happens to that family's land? It's gone.
Well, that's why you had to really regard borders and boundary markers very highly.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, in the blessings and cursings that he gets to between Ebal and Gerizim, one of I think the second curse is, "Cursed be he who moves his brother's or his neighbor's landmark." Okay, why? Because those inheritance was intended to continue that line through a familial son, someone who was born who could receive that inheritance and then go on to have children of their own, and so cause their name not to be blotted out. That was the purpose. Now, to in-laws, if a man refused to the levirate marriage, he was to be publicly shamed and have a sandal thrown at him and spit in his face. His family would be forever known as the family of the unsandaled. So again, a term of reproach for not fulfilling this law or this command. And it did happen, okay? But there may have been reasons. Now, where do we see... Actually, I don't know that that is quite the levirate marriage. But this was...
With Boaz, wasn't somebody else a closer kinsman redeemer?
You had a kinsman redeemer, yes, in the case of Boaz and Naomi, or Ruth, sorry. So there was a different setup a little bit than what we have in a strictly levirate marriage. But yes, there was shame involved in not fulfilling this element of the law, okay? But again, it was to preserve the land and the inheritances of the people of God. To men, a woman may not grab private parts of a man and cause injury, else her hand was to be cut off. Only case of punishment by mutilation in the law. So people who say the old law is filled with all of these terrible, outdated corporal punishments and cutting off people's hands and fingers and eyes and toes and all this is not accurate. This is the only place where an appendage is ever cut off. And what's the reason, again, for this, do you think? What's that? Yeah, so jeopardizing his ability to have children, and so thus cutting off his progeny from ever assuming that land, or that inheritance. That's why this was such an important law, and it wasn't to do. Now, in the context, it's if her husband is getting in a fight with another guy and the wife intervenes to help out in the fight, and she does something of this nature, then her hand is to be cut off. All right, so she can punch him in the face apparently all she wants, but she cannot do this. But again, that's what the context is. 2 weights. So again, you see this set of 2s throughout this discussion in chapter 25. What are the different weights indicative of? Cheating, theft, thievery, right? Stealing from others. Okay, if I wanted to steal from you and I wanted to get more, okay, what weights would I use? Simple math. What's that? Heavier? If I wanted more? The lighter weights, right? I would put the light weights on the scale and say, oh, that's not a pound. You might see the little South Carolina Department of Transportation seal on the gas pump. Have y'all ever seen those?
If I'm trying to get more grain, I'm going to want to put the heavier weight that says a pound on it, so I get more.
Yes, that's right. So the heavier weights. I can't do math. I'm the one who can't do math here. So that's why
I will use a lighter weight.
yes, if I'm selling it, I use a lighter weight, right? Because 1 pound of that is a whole lot less than 1 pound of my heavier weights. Why would they create weights like this? For the sole practice of deceit. Okay? Again, we have those stickers on the gas pumps that have the seal on them. I don't know if y'all have ever seen those or not. What are those for?
Says the meter's correct.
Yeah, it says the meter, it's calibrated correctly. The Measures and Weights Commission, I think is what it's called. Is that right? And they basically go in and they check to see if what they're saying is a gallon is actually a gallon. If you don't see that, go to a different gas station, okay? Because you're probably getting cheated. So again, 2 weights. Now again, this goes against God's standard for fairness, all right? 2 enemies. Well, there are 2 enemies. Israel was never to forget what Amalek did, and therefore they were tasked with erasing the memory of them from under heaven. So they had, and who is the other enemy?
What do you mean tasked with erasing? I thought they were never to forget it.
They were tasked with erasing the memory of them, so getting rid of their presence in the land. So when King Saul is tasked with going up to fight against Amalek and the Amalekites, what happens in that situation? Does he kill everybody like he was supposed to? That's 1 Samuel 15, I believe. No, he doesn't. What does he end up doing? He saves the king, and he also does what? Saves all the cattle and everything. But God told them to completely destroy them. So again, it was from when they were trying to come into the land. Who was the other group that hindered God's people from coming into the land? They were also going to be perpetual enemies of Israel. Moab, right? So you have in Numbers, okay, Balak calling for Balaam to come and curse God's people. And what is the outworking of that engagement? Well, he couldn't curse them, but he did tell Balak, king of Moab, how to make them stumble, and that's to have marriages with the daughters of Moab, and therefore God executed his judgment on Israel for disobeying him. So again, Moab and Amalek were going to be the remaining enemies of Israel. Yes, sir?
It kind of doesn't make sense to me. He says, you must not forget, and you got to remember him, but you got to blot him out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Remember him to kill him, maybe. Might be a better way to put it.
I thought it was saying, don't ever forget that kind of person. Maybe he doesn't have a good memory, but it's almost a bad memory if you're going to remember it and not forget it.
Yeah, I can't square some of the language in here.
Maybe it was, they were to remember them for what they did, so
Mhm.
when the time came to annihilate them, they would look back and how they attacked.
And that's the way I understand it, is remembering in order to execute judgment on them. So wipe them out so that there is no memory of them. When we say there's no memory of a group of people, what do we mean by that?
There's no future, you're saying.
Okay, no future, but in a very physical sense, when there's no memory of someone left.
Well, in that time, wouldn't they go in and destroy all of their sacred stones and things like that?
Yes, that's exactly right. You would break. It had a lot to do with material culture. Completely destroy that area and that land in which they dwelt, right? So that would include the standing stones and the monuments and the different things that were there. There are cultures that we have no memory of, right, in human memory, but we find some things that might attest to them, okay? So again, this is the idea, completely wiping them or eradicating them off the map. They're gone indefinitely. Yes, sir?
Like the Hittite nations, that there for the longest time, people said the Bible wasn't true because the Bible referred to the place of people of the Hittites.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until 1940 when they found evidence, that referred to the nation of Hittite.
Right. So they found a standing stone that talked about, and I think it was with one of the pharaohs in Egypt, of their enemy, the Hittites, and then they looked in Asia Minor and found the remnants of the Hittite culture. So that would be in the southern part of Asia Minor on the Mediterranean. You're absolutely right. So again, the idea is to eradicate them from memory, from living memory. We don't know them. We know they existed at one point, but we destroyed them because of their behavior. So again, remembering them when they go into the land, that when they go to war with them, these people are to be destroyed. Again, Saul did not execute this the way he should have. So, but that's an excellent point, to bring up. How do we square these words? And by the way, I will tell you, as an aside, I've set the question and answer box out there, and the last Sunday of each month, Sunday night, I will be going through those questions, whatever Bible questions people have. Put them in there, and we'll see if we can work through those together. Tonight, I will be doing that because move forward. But that'll give you a little bit more of the structure this evening. So if you do have questions like this, which is a great question, and some of the other things maybe textually that are causing you some consternation, or maybe some ideas that we struggle with in the Bible, put them down and we'll go over them. And I'll do my best to be very succinct and to the point and explain maybe the best understanding of some of those things, or what the Bible teaches on certain topics or subjects. But please feel free to do that. Now, the box is not out there this morning because it's in my office, and I was going to bring it up, and I locked my keys in my office, but that's a whole other problem. What's that?
There is a black box on the table
There is?
where you put your contributions.
Oh, then it got moved. So there you go. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in, and I'll see if I can't add those to tonight's list, or I'll save them for next month. But excellent question, TJ. I appreciate that. Ceremonial obligations, chapter 26. 2 ceremonies were to be held once Israel had secured the land and settled it: the first fruits and the triennial tithe. Okay. The first fruits were placed in a basket and taken to the sanctuary and presented to the priest. Verses 1 through 11 just communicates this. They were taken to the priest, put in a basket, and then the worshiper was then to recite a creed that consisted of, one, that he had arrived in the land which the Lord had sworn to the fathers. Okay, fulfillment of God's promise to the people. Now notice this and why they're to recite these things. This is important. His ancestors had become a mighty nation in Egypt, that God had heard the cries of his oppressed people in Egypt, and the Lord had brought them out of Egypt with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, and with it he had performed many miracles in the process. And that the Lord had brought them to a land flowing with milk and honey. The Lord had given them the first fruits of the soil. So why would they confess all of these things? So remembrance. Now, how often is this to be done? So you have the triennial tithe, which is, triennial is every 3 years. Okay, and then the annual tithe, which is how many years? Every year. And look at what they're quoting. Look at what the recitation is. God made it near impossible for them to forget. If they actually fulfilled the law, he made it impossible for them to forget what God had done for them. But what do we see by the time we get to the period of the prophets? They forgot. They absolutely forgot. Or they chalked it up to myth and legend. It's not true. Yes, we have all of these things that attest to this event, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it happened. Yes, sir?
It's probably the reason why we're commanded to have the Lord's Supper every Sunday.
Certainly it is, right? Jesus says, this do in what? Remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do what? You do show the Lord's death until he comes. So again, the nature of forgetting is part and parcel to our existence. God put stopgaps into his dispensations in order to keep them from forgetting. Ed?
Yeah, you said the same thing of what you were just saying. So I mean, it's easy to look at this and say, oh, the Israelites did this. They forgot. They got off the horse, got off the train tracks. The reality is, when something happens to me, when I get out of work, bit by bit by bit, I'm now 3 miles offshore, and I didn't realize it. So,
Yep.
same thing happens to us, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and during Jesus' times, the elite, the Jews, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they did things by rote. Their hearts were far from it.
Mhm.
So in the same token, having recently gone to, as I mentioned to you, gone to a Catholic Mass, you can spit out, rote memorization of creeds and so forth, and still not feel it, not really think about it. So, there's a place in the middle there somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. And Diane makes a good point. We can spit out rote sayings and rote verses maybe from the Bible, but yet not really be convicted in it at all. How many of you ever sang songs that you didn't think about the words? I have. Why? Sing and be happy. Anybody sing that song? Anybody ever sang it and thought, why am I singing this? Yeah, well, it's just the first one that came to mind. But yeah, we sing songs and we do have the propensity to forget why we're to sing, right? I will sing with the Spirit. I will sing with the what also? Understanding also. Paul is very clear about that. So again, the idea of a recitation is fine, but they should be thinking about the recitation. Now, here's the key part of this. Verse 16. This day of chapter 26. This day the Lord thy God hath commanded thee to do these statutes and judgments. Thou shalt therefore keep them and do them with what? With all thy heart and with all thy soul. What did he say all the way back in Deuteronomy chapter 6? I know it's been a while since we've been there, but Deuteronomy chapter 6. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all thy strength, right? So again, we've got the admonition there to love God, and then here in Deuteronomy 26, lest we forget, do these things with your heart. Have the right disposition and attitude toward God while you're doing these things that God's commanded. And what will that engender within the Israelite? Obedience, but a love for God. If I really think about what God did for us, okay, and this is very similar to what God has done for us, okay, when God delivered them from an Egyptian bondage, is that a parallel to anything else that we see in the New Testament? Yeah. God's deliverance of humanity from sin. Okay, out of bondage to sin and into freedom, into the promised land, right? That is into the church, or ultimately into heaven. So you're looking at a very strong parallel here, that they should not forget God's provision and intervention in their national life and why they are where they are. They're there because God brought them to that point, not for any reason of their own. Yes, sir, David.
Verse 17 really clarifies what he's talking about in verse 16. All your heart and all your soul. You have today declared the Lord to be your God, and that you will walk in his ways and keep his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, and listen to his voice.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if we're doing this with all our heart and all our soul, we're saying we're going to be totally committed to God, and he's going to be our life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a commitment element to this, in that they need to be thinking about what they're doing. It's not just rote practice, okay? It's not just ceremonial practice for the sake of ceremony. Steve.
It's one of the reasons why pride and covetousness is always talked about as such a sin, because we all have that. Because if you are to work from morning to night, each and every day to provide and all that, at some point, if you don't think about God, if you don't think about all the things that God has given you, you feel that you are the one doing this, and you're the one sacrificing, you are the one doing that, and then you try to, you want your family to acknowledge it, and it's so easy, because we all do it, because I think that's one of the reasons why we're to get married, and so that we work with each other, because my wife has many times reminded me that I go to work to provide for my family, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to do that. And it's throughout the Bible, we're always, and even the Israelites and even us, we're always commanded to make sure that we remember God. Because the only time we really forget is when, okay, everything's going along good, and now something happens, then you start to remember, and then you start to forget. Wait, that's
Yeah, the God of last resort.
things that happened to Israel throughout the year.
Yeah. So certainly it is important to remember God, and that he is the source of all of our blessings. And that's the point as well. I reminded of the prophet, I can't remember who, not by might nor by power, but by my hand, saith the Lord, when he's talking about deliverance. It's not going to be by you, it's going to be by me. So God is going to take care of his people. Then we get to the triennial tithe. This is the every third year. The tithe of the third year was kept in the towns and shared with the needy, also with the Levites. The foreigners, who mostly would be of the servant class, could also partake in the giving or distribution of this tithe. And so those that were poor and strangers in the land were taken care of. The fatherless, the widows, and then the Levites would also have claim to parts of the triennial tithe. On the first celebration of the trinomial tithe, the ritual prayer was to be uttered. We see that actually in the text. In the prayer, the worshiper stated that he had laid aside the sacred portion and distributed it to the needy as the law required. Okay, first fruits are what part of the crop? The best, right? That which comes off the top before anyone has taken out of that gleaning. All right, that's intended for one specific purpose. Those are dedicated to God. So in the setting that aside, there were rules. He had not desecrated the sacred portion by eating it during a time of mourning. Okay, I'm sorrowful, I'm mourning, and I go and I grab part of the first fruits to fill my belly rather than taking from what is mine. Touching it while unclean. Okay, that would defile the sacrifice. Or offering any portion of it to the dead, which is a practice that I've not been able to find or get much clarification on, so we'll just leave it as is. He had carried out the letter of the law. So he was to also say that he had done everything that God expected with this first fruit. He then was required to call upon the Lord to look down from heaven and bless Israel in the land. So again, where does their mind go at the end of even this offering? To God and his favor on the people and the blessing thereof. Final reminders in this section. Moses concludes this section with several reminders to the people. One, to submit to God's law enthusiastically. Again, we saw this with all your soul, with all your heart, and cheerfully. To submit to the declaration they had made that the Lord was their God and to the covenant made between them. Okay, so that would be part of their submission to God. To walk in his ways, that is to carry out God's expectations for their daily conduct, not just their religious obligations. To remember the Lord had declared them to be his people and that they were a treasured possession. And then that he would elevate them above other nations in praise, fame, and honor because of their holiness. We'll pick up next week and hopefully finish through the end of Deuteronomy. I appreciate your attention this morning.